Hi everyone. Today I'm going to take a big U-turn from my last three videos. I made three videos on films by Sam Peckinpah, who is can be seen as the poet of machismo, of kind of a male weepy kind of director of the 1970s, to a female weepy of the 1930s, and this is Imitation of Life from 1934, January 2023 edition into the Criterion collection, starring Claudette, Colbert, and Louise Beavers. And this is a movie that was confronts a lot of the issues of 1930s that seem strangely relevant today as well. The basic story is a single mom whose husband has recently passed away, and she's trying to make ends meet, bring up her small daughter by running her husband's business, which was sort of door-to-door maple syrup selling. And one day at the back door, a black woman is there, and she's applying for a job as a nanny, cook, housekeeper, but she's got the wrong address. But for some reason, they hit it off immediately. They become friends. She just wants room and board. She too is a single mom. She has a small daughter who's very light-skinned, which plays a big part in the ultimate drama of the story. She has a recipe for pancakes. The business acumen of the Claudette Colbert character sees financial possibilities there, and a big successful business is eventually is instituted. And so we go from basic rags to riches story. But the film is confronting head-on certain elements of society, fractures in society, the role of single mothers, the role of women in society, the economic conditions, class conditions, but basically it's about race relationships. It's about the relationship between of this kind of unequal friendship. It definitely is a friendship, but it's still, no matter, even when the riches come, it has an unequal balance to it. And it's also about passing because of Peola. This is Delilah. Louise Beavers is Delilah, a character somewhat based on the Aunt Jemima character in our syrup and pancake mix. But Peola, as she grows older, she wants to pass. She doesn't want to be black. She can pass as white. Why does she have to have this black identity of her mother's? So this ran afoul of the production code. Now, this is 1934, so the code was starting to really gain power and clamp down on elements in movies, mostly salacious, but elements in movies, sexual, but also on racial circumstances, including miscegenation, which they define as the cohabitation between the races, a black person and a white person. And this was taboo. This was a subject that was absolutely taboo. So Peola herself is a product of that somewhere along the line. American society, according to the Protection Code, could not tolerate such an idea. So it's all played out melodramatically, restrained melodrama. The director, John Stahl, is a rather restrained melodramatist, and he was very well, he had a lot of experience in melodrama. We'll get to that in a minute. But melodrama has a way of taking these kind of social problems, these social forces that are in society, the powers, and illuminate them for an audience in a very emotional way. So we recognize that these things exist in society, but we don't want to really confront it. But in a melodramatic story, we can. And because we have personalities, and these personalities, we can see them as victims of the contradictions that are within society. That is a general feeling, I think, of melodrama, melodrama at its best, and John Stahl was very good at it. He was a very successful director in the silent era. He was so famous in making women's pictures. He was so famous in this that they show some poster art where John Stahl's picture is the main element of the poster selling the movie. He's a name today that very few people, he's now coming back into sort of rediscovery, but certainly in the 1920s and in the 1930s, he was a big name. He was Universal's top director. Backstreet, which I think was his previous film, was also a very big hit. And excuse me, there is a book now out on him called The Call of the Heart, John Stahl and the Hollywood Melodramas, in which it's like a survey book, and so all his films are surveyed, from the ones that exist from silent films, and some of them do not, by some really great contributors, including Imogen Sarah Smith, and more about her later. And this is Stahl's third appearance in the Criterion collection, because in this edition of Magnificent Obsession, this is the Douglas Sirk version of the 1950s. It also includes his 1935 version, I believe, John Stahl's 35 version. But of course, I think the movie that's really accelerating John Stahl's name, his reputation, increasing his reputation, is his 1940s melodrama Leave Her to Heaven, often called the first color film noir, with Gene Tierney. This is just an outstanding film. It looks better every time I see it and every time everybody else sees it. It's fantastic looking. Do you ever want to see what Technicolor was like compared to the post-Technicolor 3-strip Technicolor? This is the 3-strip Technicolor. You'll see colors in this film you've never seen before. And I think that was Stahl's first color film. So he's now well represented in the Criterion collection, and we have Claudette Colbert, 1934 Claudette Colbert. We have not only this film, a huge hit, but we have Cecil B. DeMille's Cleopatra, Frank Capra's It Happened One Night, all starring Claudette Colbert in 1934. What a year! Louise Beavers as the maid, and this is the kind of role that, you know, she knew she was the only kind of role she was ever going to have to play, and she had to adopt the Southern black drawl that Hollywood probably invented itself. She was a very cultured lady from Cincinnati, and but she wanted to be an actress, and if she was going to succeed in Hollywood, this was the kind of role she has. And this is her. I would say this film is probably the height of her film stardom. And then we get Freddie Washington, and Freddie Washington plays the daughter who wants to pass as white. Freddie Washington, and I'll just show her a brief picture of her here. This is Freddie Washington here. She was only in about 11 movies, and as you can see, she was somebody who could pass, because in real life she was black, but she, unlike her character, she was not apologetic about being black. She never, you know, in her early days, she was considered a really promising actress, but they couldn't make a big star out of her because she was black, but she looked white. And she stated that the studio heads told her, you know, we can pass you off as white, and you don't have, you'll have a chance to become a movie star. But she had a great deal of integrity as far as who she was, her identity, and she never did pass. And she later she did stage work, but she also did a whole lot of activist work as well throughout her life. The novel that the film was based on was written by Fannie Hurst, a big best-selling novelist. IMITATIon of Life was the big bestseller in 1933. She had many before that, including Backstreet, which John Stahl also very successfully adapted to the movies a couple of years before. And Fannie Hurst, too, was a big activist, good friend of Eleanor Roosevelt. So in the 30s, she was involved in many of the New Deal kind of committees. And for all her life, she was involved in women's, and especially she was sort of a proto-feminist, and she was very much involved with the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, and befriended Zora Neale Hurston, who became a famous black writer. She was a student at Barnard University, at Barnard College at the time in New York City, and she lived, I believe she lived with Fannie Hurst for about a year as her secretary and her chauffeur. And we get a introduction by Imogen Sarah Smith on the supplements here, and of course she's always great. It's about 25 minutes, and there's a lot in there. I guess you would say the highlights of what would have been had Criterion had her do a full-length commentary. So we get a really excellent view of John Stahl's career and what led up to his directing of Imitation of Life, and and especially how it differs from the novel. But there's two supplements here. That's it, but they're great because the other one is with Marion Petty, who is an author of a book called Stealing the Show, African American Performers and Audiences in 1930s Hollywood. And boy, does she really encapsulate the contradictions of what it was like for black actors, and especially in this case, Louise Beavers and Freddie Washington, and the roles that they had to take on, and how these roles were looked at by white audiences and black audiences. Black audience could see some of the ways that this was not being portrayed, this relationship, realistically, but nevertheless, this was a film in which two black actors, they're not the centerpiece of the story. I mean, the story is basically Claudette Colbert and her daughter and her economic rise, but the Louise Beavers, Freddie Washington, Delilah and Peola story is what emotionally captures the film. It is the center of the film. It's what everybody remembers about Imitation of Life. And especially in the funeral scene, it's beautifully done. It's just beautifully done by Stahl. Now in the remake, Douglas Sirk also remade this. Douglas Sirk in 1959, Douglas Sirk's last film, another huge hit. In fact, I think in '59, the remake was the biggest hit Universal Studios ever had. Sirk was not a restrained melodramatist. He took it to the limit. So his film, a 1959 film, played on television a lot. And I don't know if it was the first movie that ever made me cry, but boy, did it make me cry, the funeral scene in Sirk's version. And it's so desolating. It's just, no matter how you might look at the artifice of the story. I saw it later on, many years later, in a film society, and of course, film society full of cinephiles, but I don't think it was a dry eye in the house at the end of Sirk's version. But in Imitation of Life, I think, it is a tearjerker. Stahl may be more restrained, but it's nevertheless going to jerk the tears for sure. And getting back to Marion Petty, this is just, she wrote the essay in here in the foldout as well. And let me tell you, this is absolutely beautiful, this essay. I mean, the Criterion always has fantastic essays, but this may be if I was to do the essay of the year, I think this may be it. And so her book, Stealing the Show, of course, like all film books, is hugely expensive. I think it's like $45 or something like that. I got to check some of my libraries to see if I could find it, because it's a great subject matter as well. And the subject matter of almost 90 years ago, and these are problems that we still face today. Maybe we're always going to face them. Who knows? But that makes it, even though this is 1934. I don't think you're going to find this a film that has no relevance to our times. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.